What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is a story where Izuku was the son of the radio demon, Alastor. Radio. Something was always off about Izuku. No one could put their finger on it, but there was just something off. But who could have guessed in a million years that he held such a dark family secret? But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations, and support the amazing author TheCrazedFanFictioner for writing this story. Now, let's get into the story. This story starts with the lovely mother we've all come to know as Inko, the gorgeous young woman with green locks down past her shoulders who has her whole life ahead of her. She has oftentimes been told she could easily go full-time with her modeling career, but she would often turn down such offers because it would require her to go to big bustling cities and be on a tight schedule constantly, which was far from the future she had in mind, so she settled for some small-time modeling advertising for local shops and whatnot here and there to help bring in some money for the house. She just wasn't built like her friend who thrived on that kind of life. This young woman was heading off to the doctor for her checkup. Her best friend Mitsuki was a stunning blonde woman with a body most would leave most men gawking at. Some would say she'd be the perfect woman if it wasn't for that nasty attitude of hers. She was currently driving Inko to her appointment due to her car having been in the shop at the moment. Thanks again. I kept telling Hisashi to check the engine light. But no, he insisted that it was normal and didn't mean anything, she said with a... Mitsuki just chuckled at her friend's little rant. You're fine. I didn't really have anything planned for today, so this was a nice excuse to leave the house. Sigh. There's my rant for the day, but to be honest I couldn't be happier. I have great friends, a loving husband, and we're trying to get a child on the way. It's almost like I'm dreaming and I don't want to wake up. I just hope everything is alright, because no matter how hard we try we just can't get it right. I'm honestly getting a little worried maybe we were. Mitsuki had cut her off before she could get too deep into those negative thoughts. Everything is fine, some things just take more time. I guarantee you that this will go fine, and you guys are just having an off month. They started to pull up to the clinic and started slowing down as she was saying this. I guess you're right, maybe I'm just overthinking things. She had started getting out of the car and was about to close the door when she hesitated and looked back to Mitsuki. I just want this to go right. You guys and Hisashi are all I have left. I just want a nice family to look forward to every time I come home in the future. She closed the door and headed inside. Before she could respond further, she greeted the nurse with a smile and waited for the doctor to come grab her for her scheduled appointment. While Mitsuki was sitting in her car, she had tried keeping herself occupied while waiting for Inko to finish her appointment when she had a call come in from her husband who sounded like he was fuming. That motherfucker, I swear I'll kill him. This had startled Mitsuki, seeing as she rarely ever heard him cuss, which immediately was a red flag. Masaru, calm down, what happened? He tried composing himself but failed miserably as he still sounded enraged. It's about that good-for-nothing low-life Hisashi. She was mortified as she listened to what he had seen and sent pictures as proof. No. This will destroy Inko. But she can't just hold on to this information while her best friend lives her life with that man without knowing what he's doing. Fast forward to Inko sitting in one of the many side rooms. The doctor had knocked on the door before letting himself in and sat down across from her. She could tell immediately that something was wrong from the atmosphere when he had entered the room. Is something the matter, doctor? Is something wrong? He just looked at her sadly. I'm sorry. I'm not sure how to say this, but you can't have kids. The silence that followed was deafening as she had to take a moment to process this information. He had just told her that she won't be able to make the family she had always dreamed. Her response was barely even audible. What? The doctor just gave her a sad look as he continued. It's a rare genetic defect. She began to panic. She didn't want it to be true. She wanted to give her husband the daughter he always wanted. What if it's just a mistake? What about trying to cure it? He put his hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her. I knew that there was some sort of defect due to my quirk to detect health anomalies. I was hoping it was just something minor like a sore back or something, but this was what the test kept coming out as. As for the test, if it were a normal disorder, it could have been cured. But with the arrival of quirks, some diseases and disorders actually have evolved to actually interact directly with the genes of where your quirk factor is located, and we've yet to truly make ground on how to approach to effectively treat them. And she had become numb to everything around her at that point. She saw that the doctor kept talking but didn't hear anything else coming from him. She had finished her appointment, nodding and complying with whatever else they had needed from her, and just absent-mindedly walked back out to the car that was waiting for her. She turned towards Mitsuki, who she had noticed was fuming and wasn't ready for the bombshell that was about to drop on her. One thing about Mitsuki's nature is that when she wants to say something, she's blunt and straightforward about it. Sometimes a bit too blunt. This was one of those times, seeing as she hadn't noticed the state Inko was in due to her own rage at the man she thought she knew and even considered a friend. Inko, we need to talk about Hisashi. That whore is having an affair behind your back. Inko had heard a snapping sound. Her whole world around her had just shattered into irrecoverable pieces. It was around then that Mitsuki had realized maybe she had been a bit too upfront, and that something else was wrong with Inko, I'm so sorry, I should've. I can't have kids. She had just interrupted her with that simple sentence. What? I meant what I said. I'll never be able to have a kid of my own. It's an incurable genetic disorder attached to my quirk. I'll never be able to hold a child of my own in my own arms. Inko, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. There is nothing to say. The look in Inko's eyes had deeply unsettled Mitsuki. She had tried comforting her the best she could. She drove them back both to her place so her and Masaru could help her with what comes next. They kept trying to get through to her, but she had just shut down. So, they decided to give the spare bedroom to her and hold her up for the night, thinking that was for the best. Inko just cried herself to sleep that night, cursing Hisashi, cursing God for being this cruel to her, cursing anyone she had believed responsible. Little did she know she had caught something's attention. Inko had tossed and turned in her fitful sleep and found herself waking up at the dead of midnight. She had to do it. She had to confront Hisashi. It may not have been the smartest decision, but she was in no way in the right headspace to make rational decisions. She had made her way home, noticing his car wasn't in the driveway yet. Another late night shift again. She had thought in disgust. She let herself in and sat at the kitchen table and just waited. Sure enough, his car came rolling in around half an hour later. She heard him unlock the door and tried to be sneaky coming in. He had nearly jumped out of his skin when he turned around and had seen his wife glaring daggers at him. Jesus, Inko, you nearly gave me a heart attack. I know I should have been home sooner, but they needed me to work overt. Cut the bullshit. He was taken aback by her abruptness. You excuse me? We both know you weren't at work. He was starting to get nervous at her tone. I don't know what you mean. Who is she? He was in full-blown panic mode now. It was around this point he had started to see the things around the kitchen start to shake, and some knives would begin to float and point themselves towards him. I don't know who you're talking about. Masaru saw you leaving a woman's house today. He knew he was fucked. Now let me explain. She was a friendly colleague whom I was helping. You don't come out of a colleague's house half-dressed in a hurry and give them a kiss on the mouth. He started to feel the need to run away, run far away from here. She cut him off. Get out. She would not hear any more of this man's lies. I said get out. As everything in the kitchen started to fly at him as he ducked out of the way and back out the door to his car and quickly sped away. Inko had let out a scream that shook the whole house. Then that was when she first heard him. She couldn't quite explain it, but it sounded almost as if he was coming through an old speaker or something. My, what do we have here? The dream had started getting fuzzier as she was being woken up by her son crying in the night. There is Izuku, mommy's got you. She rocked him to sleep and laid back down in bed while holding her little bundle of joy close to her. Her little Izuku was the cutest thing in the world to her. He took after her mom a bit with some differences. He had freckles on his cheeks and lovely black hair with highlights in his hair somewhere between lime green and neon green. His cute adorable wide eyes had a matching lovely green to them. He was also a bit paler than her, but that was nothing to be worried about, the doctors had told her. She still smiles thinking back to the baffled expressions when she was found to be pregnant from Mitsuki, and most of all from the doctor who had given her the prognosis. He did several more tests, and he could not come up with a reason as to how this was possible. Now Inko is not a spiteful person, but she did get enjoyment out of his reaction. Inko had looked down to where she thought she had placed a baby sound machine to play lullabies for her angel to not see it anywhere, but instead had found an old-time radio of the kind she hadn't seen in a long time. She went to go touch it when it spurred to life and start playing what she believed was I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire. She was about to turn it off but had noticed it was helping put Izuku to sleep, to instead opted to leave it where it is. She smiled at the radio and decided to go back to sleep with Izuku. As they lie there sleeping in the night, a shadow that belonged to nothing in the room had reached out from its spot on the wall and stroked the boy's hair to only pull itself back into the wall and melt into the other shadows of the room. As Izuku grew older, his hair highlights had grown more into a yellow bordering orange color, but other than that, and having stayed paler than the normal person, he grew up pretty healthy. He had also formed a close relationship with his mom's best friend's only child, the hothead known as Bakugo, with a foul mouth he often got a hit to the head for. At around 3 years, nearly 4 years old, while Bakugo had gotten his quirk, and they were just waiting for Izuku's to come in so they could plan how to become the best heroes together. They were out playing in their favorite spot in the woods when Bakugo had nearly fallen into the creek when he shot his hand out to catch him. He was too far away from him to reach, but was slightly startled when his own shadow's hand had reached out and grabbed onto him, startling Bakugo. "I got my quirk." It wasn't something flashy like Bakugo's explosions, but was still great nonetheless. "How'd you do that?" "Your shadow just jumped out at me." That was so freaking cool. The kids were just bubbling over with how cool each other quirks were, and were just talking back and forth away about what kind of heroes they'll become, unaware of the misfortune right around the corner. Inko was sitting on a bench in the park with Mitsuki. They were just enjoying the park while their kids played, with an occasional cough came from Inko. Till Mitsuki decided to finally break the silence. "This may not have been what you had in mind when it came to your dream family, but I guess everything worked out in the end after your divorce." Mitsuki was really glad that Izuku had come along. She was really worried for his mother after her world had nearly fallen apart all around her, and she didn't know what Inko might have done had he not come along. "Yeah, not how I thought this is how it'd play out, but I'm glad that this is the way things turned out." They say they're a bit longer as Inko's cough kept getting worse and it was starting to worry Mitsuki. "Hey, are you alright? That's a nasty cough you've got there." Inko had pulled back her hand and noticed that she had coughed up some blood and quickly tried wiping it on the outside of the bench without her friend noticing. But turned out she was not quite as stealthy as she had hoped, and she grabbed her hand and pulled it closer to get a better look. "Christ, Inko, you need to get this looked at." She just gave her a sad look in response. "Mitsuki, you may not believe me when I say this, but I don't think I'll have too much time left." It was dead silent after she had said that. "What? Why? What happened? Do you go and?" Inko had just put her hand up and continued. "Even if I do go in, they won't be able to help me." "What do you mean? How do you know without even trying to get help in the first place?" "It has to do with Izuku. By all accounts, I should not have been able to have him no matter what they would have done to help me." She was just flabbergasted by where this whole conversation was headed. There was no way that Inko was actually dying. "Right. Which brings me to my next point. I think it's about time I think he goes to go see his father." She had to put her foot down here. There was something wrong with Inko. She had gone delirious or something. "After everything you went through to get away from that bastard, you want him to go?" "Hisashi was never the father." "And what? What do you mean he's not the father?" "There's no one else it could be, unless you were cheating on him, but I know you better than that." "Well, you're right in that I never cheated on that bastard, but something had visited me the night you found me after I confronted Hisashi, and he had proposed to me a deal." She went on to explain everything that had proceeded to happen, and what she had left out from her explanations to everyone. Once she had explained everything to Mitsuki, she went to say something but raised her hand to stop her from responding. "I'm at peace with everything that I've done and everything that's happened. If I had the choice, I'd make the same decisions all over again." She looked up at their kids running back to them with exciting news. "I just ask that you help me with what's necessary when the time comes." Mitsuki put on her best face for the kids as they told her all about their new discovery about Izuku's new quirk. Luckily, they were in their own world to notice anything wrong with her. A month had passed, and during that time his hair highlights continued to become a darker orange. After some tearful Inko had Izuku gather his things and tell Bakugo farewell because officially he was going to go see some relatives on the other side of the country, who are also on Inko's will as the closest relatives that would take Izuku in should something happen to her, and that he won't be back for a while. "You better be back for you, eh? We still gotta become the top heroes." Izuku looked back with a big grin on his face. "I wouldn't dream of missing it." With that, Inko had taken her son, who had packed some clothes into his backpack and one extra thing he was allowed to take with him. He had decided on the small old-time portable radio he's had for as far back as he can remember. She drove him out of town to make things look convincing, but pulled over on a side path and pulled up next to an abandoned-looking barn with the painting having long peeled off and Mother Nature slowly taking back the building. This left Izuku a bit perplexed as he thought he was going to go see his distant relatives like his mom told him. This instead felt like the middle of nowhere. "Mom, what are we doing here?" She knelt down and gave him a big hug. "Honey, I think it's time that you finally met your father." His eyes went wide. I get to meet Daddy. Where's he been? Why hasn't he come to see me? Why? He was hushed by his mother. She took a deep breath as she thought about how to explain things. Your father is a special man. He would love to see you more, but due to circumstances is very limited in doing so. But please do not believe he never wanted to see you. He's been closer to you at times than you realize. He then looked at his surrounding. Then what are we doing here then? I'll believe it'd be easiest to show you instead of trying to explain it. She led him into the barn stables and just stood there. She got a smile from seeing her son's reaction, going wide-eyed upon seeing what looked like a pentagram circle drawing itself in the air. When it finished, he could see into it, and what looked like a city, but less inviting than the ones he's familiar with, and not to mention the sky is red. He can also swear he sees a sign that says "Welcome to Hell." Wow, who did that? How did they do that? Where is that? What? She hushed him again before he could get into his mumbling. Your father did it. He's waiting for you on the other side. You'll have to find him, but I know you'll find him easy enough. Now I won't be able to go with you. That was when his thoughts came to a screeching halt. You won't be able to come with me? Her heart was nearly torn in two from his sad puppy-like face. I have things I need to finish here, but don't worry. I'll meet you there someday. That did little to put him at ease, but at least he'd be able to see his mother at all. Now Izuku, I don't think we should keep him waiting for long. After all, he's really eager to finally meet you in person. I love you so much, Izuku. She gave her son one last giant bear hug, then nudged him to go through the portal. She did her best to hold back her tears, but the dam broke when he turned back to her on the other side and smiled at her. I love you, Mom. And the portal closed just like that, leaving her alone in the barn. Izuku was amazed as he looked all around. Wow! It's like I'm in a whole other world. He was currently on a sidewalk and walked into the road and was too busy gawking at everything when he heard a screeching noise and his head snapped to it in time to see a limo stop inches from hitting him. Oh my god, I almost got hit. This is why Mom always tells you to look both ways. The back doors flew open as he saw a tall, slim blonde girl come rushing out. Are you okay? He got a better look at her as she checked him up and down. She was a tall blonde with long curly blonde hair, red cheeks, and black lips. What were you doing in the road? Sorry, miss, I didn't mean to. I was too busy trying to figure out where I am. She seemed to calm down a bit after seeing he was alright. Where you are? You're in hell, silly. Did you die recently? And aren't you a little young to have gone to hell? He was left a bit puzzled by her questions. What's hell? I don't think I died, I feel fine. Now she didn't want to be suspicious of the child in front of her, but something about him just felt off, and more so than the fact that he looked more human than he currently was. Okay, then what's the last thing you remember? I was in a barn with my mom, when a portal showed up and told me I had to hop through it. This greatly concerned Charlie. Did that woman just condemn her own child? Okay, calm down, I have a living child who's currently trapped in hell. I best take him back to the hotel and try to figure things out with Vaggie there. Oh, I almost forgot, where are my manners? My name is Charlie, what's yours? My name's Izuku, Izuku Midoriya. What a lovely name, Izuku. I was on my way to my hotel. I know some people there that might know what to do in this situation. Izuku just kind of shifted where he was at. He was about to tell her that his mom told him not to accept random rides from strangers when he saw a shadow that wasn't Charlie's behind her beckoning towards the limo as if trying to tell him to follow her. Okay. She led him up to the door, trying to figure out how she was even going to bring this up as she opened it. She yelled across the hotel trying to get someone's attention. Vaggie, can you come here for a moment? Coming, hun. He saw another woman enter. This was slim and had long white hair with a big bow on her back and an X where one of her eyes should have been. Who's this? She asked, pointing towards Izuku. There was something about him that made her feel weary just being around him. Sue, this is Izuku. We may have a tinsy bit of a problem. From what I can tell, he's still alive, and stuck here, in hell. What? How did a human child get stuck in hell? She had been rather loud, so the other residents of the hotel started gathering in the room to see what the commotion was. Among them there was Charlie, and the one he now knew as Vaggie, along with what looked like a giant cat person. A spider-looking feminine fellow that looked like they really liked the color pink. And what looked like a small one-eyed imp-looking girl. Vaggie continued, still flustered by the situation. How could this have happened? My mom took me to the portal saying that I'd get to meet my daddy. Charlie stopped and looked at him. You didn't mention that earlier. Well, I kind of forgot to, sorry. It was around then that they all heard what sounded like an old song playing from a record player. From what they could tell, it was, "I don't want to set the world on fire." Vaggie pulled a spear from seemingly nowhere. Why does he have to show up now of all times? Izuku had perked up at the song and the familiar voice singing it. That's when he decided to make his grand entrance while walking around the corner, continuing the song. From around the corner came a pale man with sharp yellow teeth. He had a red angled bob cut with black tipping and 2 more tufts of what looked to be hair. He wore a red pinstripe suit and had a monocle on his right eye. Vaggie had turned towards Izuku. "Trust me, kid, you don't want anything to do with Daddy?" Everyone else fell quiet upon hearing that word leave the child's mouth when the spider-looking person spoke up. "Kid, I think you might have gotten him mixed up with." Alastor had waved his cane and hushed them mid-sentence. "I see you kept the present I gave to you when you were young." Izuku had pulled out the old radio, and sure enough, it looked exactly like the one that was kept at the top of Alastor's cane. "Daddy?" Izuku bolted towards Alastor and just latched onto his legs. That was when the cat-looking person spoke up in almost a panic. "I wouldn't do that if I were." Then everyone just stopped as they saw Alastor kneel down and embrace the boy. They saw the dark orange in his hair turn to a matching red like Alastor's own hair. "My, how I've been wanting to meet you, my boy." When Izuku reopened his eyes, everyone had seen how his eyes had blood-red sclerae, bright red irises and black pupils much like Alastor's own. In fact, they looked exactly like his. Alastor had picked the boy up and turned to everyone else in the room. "Everyone, I'd like for you to meet my son Izuku." No one could believe what was happening right in front of them. It was common knowledge down there that sinners couldn't have children. But right there, as clear as day, was what none could deny as the offspring of the one and only radio demon. The cat-looking man was the only one so say what was on everyone's mind at that exact moment. What the fuck? What the fuck indeed? Everyone just stood their mouths agape, unable to comprehend that the joyful little boy in the radio demon's arms was in fact his own child. Shaking off her stupor, Charlie was the first to recover from her shock. But that's impossible. It's physically impossible for sinners to have kids once in hell. Alastor just gave her a very unsettling grin from ear to ear at her response. Impossible no, improbable yes. You'd be amazed the things you can learn when you know where to listen and who to talk to. He gave the room one last once over and continued. As much as I would love to continue this interesting conversation, I have some catching up to do with my son. With that, the shadows around him raised up and consumed them, and they were gone. Being ever oblivious to the implications around his parentage that were brought up among the strangers, Izuku was over the moon to finally meet his father. "Daddy, I have so much to ask you. Like, where were you? Why didn't I ever hear from you?" He began mumbling so fast that Alastor was having a hard time telling what he was saying. "Slow down, there's no race. I'll try by simplifying things. As hard as it is to believe I was always near you in some capacity, I would have loved to been there with you and your mother in person, but due to circumstances I had no way to actually safely be there in person. It has to do with how I am. We'd be what you call demons." This has put a look of confusion on Izuku's face. "You mean like the big scary monsters that come take children in the night?" That had made him chuckle. "Do I look like a big scary monster to you?" Izuku shook his head. Now, stories about demons have been exaggerated over time. Oftentimes also been confused with people masking their actions as that of something supernatural. But that was a long time ago, so long ago that people didn't even have quirks. I guess that makes sense. If there were no quirks and something looked unnatural, people would assume as much. Aren't you a smart one? But enough about me, let's hear more about you. Alastor listened intently to everything he had to say. He knew most of the things that's happened, but he knew it couldn't hurt to listen regardless. And that brings me up to my quirk. When Katsuki nearly into the creek, it was almost like my shadow came to life and caught him. It's just like your. I saw that you control shadows too. Alastor just began laughing, which made Izuku pout at him for laughing at his quirk. Don't get me wrong, Izuku, I'm happy for you, but what you have isn't a quirk. What do you mean I don't have a quirk? We saw it with our own eyes. At this, Izuku's shadow seemed to be patting its foot on the ground behind him, seemingly upset too. Now let me explain something. A quirk is something a human develops in their lifetime. But demons don't actually have quirks. We have powers, yes, and if you had a quirk during your life, then your powers would often be similar to that. You, my boy, have obtained something so much greater than a quirk. Izuku's eyes just went wide and were sparkling. He had something better than a quirk. Almost looking over something he had said, almost. What do you mean when during your life? Something just felt off with the way he had described it. "Oh, I just love how sharp you are, but I mean exactly that. There are natural-born demons, and then there are those like me who once were human. What I'm trying to say is that I was alive at one point." Izuku didn't know how to feel about this. This was shocking news to him. He knew his mother told him that his father was a special man, but he would have thought that his father was basically dead. "So, does that mean that you're a bad man to end up here?" "Haha. I was a saint by no means, yes. But practically anyone can end up down here for the slightest slip-up. That old coot up there is as strict and uptight as they come. As much as humans are in denial and want to believe he's forgiving. Which is why I'm so amused by what Charlie wants to do here." He proceeded to laugh at the thought of someone making it up there. "But back to the topic at hand, what we have isn't some measly old quirk. You can do so much more." He began to show him nearly all the things he was capable of. The voodoo magic would have to wait till he was older, as it was a bit of a finicky magic to control, and he didn't want his son to get too curious for his own good and end up crippling himself. In the background, going unnoticed by him, it seemed like their own shadows were bonding themselves as Alastor's shadow was throwing Izuku's shadow up into the air and catching him. "Wow. I'm able to do all that. Well, I'm hoping to find out what you're capable of. What do you say we go out and see what you can do?" "Really? Right now? Well, before we get ahead of ourselves, I believe introductions are in order with everyone here. After all, you'll be staying here." He looked over at the door. "Now, wouldn't everyone be so kind to come in and introduce yourselves?" Izuku slightly jumped when the door flung open and everyone practically fell on each other. Charlie just looked up from the pile with a bit of a strained smile. "Hey, how's it going?" She just nervously chuckled. "Well, come on in. We don't have all day, you know." They all piled into the room. They just stared between the two just sitting there on the bed. "Well, you obviously met me already. I had no idea what a surprise I was in for when I picked you up, though. The name's Vaggie, and to be frank, I don't trust or." Alastor's head just snapped towards her. "Now, I don't mind what you may think of me, but if you treat my son harshly or unfairly just because he so happens to be my son." Static began filling the room as his face began to slowly look more and more demonic. "You will wish for death. Are we clear?" Everyone just shook their heads unanimously. "Wow, Dad, that was so cool. How'd you do that?" Everyone was just wondering if this boy really his son. "The name's Husk? How'd you even get someone willing to raise your child, Alastor?" "That's a nice long story we'll save for another day, seeing as we don't want to waste it away just standing around. I do have plans to get to after all." He patted Izuku's head as he was talking. "Name's Angel Dusttoots, and I'm still trying to figure out if I'm in the middle of a nightmare, or if this is really happening. 'Cause we can hardly survive with just Alastor. I don't think we can if he's got a mini-me running around with him. I guess I'm last then. My name's Nifty." Alastor stood up from the bed, motioning Izuku to follow. "I would love to stay and chat more, but I finally have time to spend with my son, and I don't plan any wasting any of that time. Oh, and he'll be staying here with us in my room for the foreseeable future." He smiled in Charlie's direction. "That should be fine. As long as he doesn't try to go tear down the hotel, he's welcome here." She gave a smile, trying to reassure herself this was the right decision. I mean, he was just a kid. He wasn't exactly like Alastor, right? With that, they were out the door. Vaggie just slapped her hand her face. "Why do I feel like that man is going to be the death of me?" As they walked along the street, any demon that saw them approaching either ran for the hills or hid in whatever was closest to them. "Now, Izuku, there's some things I do need to mention while you stay in hell. This isn't a friendly place, and kindness is very hard to come by. With that being said, I will be teaching you how to use your powers." They continued their walk to what looked to be a park. While on their walk there, Alastor explained the basic hierarchy system of hell and how it paid off to become strong or be smart. Izuku just took everything in like a sponge, which delighted Alastor, seeing how bright his son was. Another thing about becoming a demon after being a human is that you'd be confined to this ring of hell, the ring of pride. Something that I've been thinking about is that you'd face no such restrictions, seeing as you're of demonic descent, yes, but you're not a full human either. You're a natural-born demon, so you should be able to travel hell as freely as you'd like. Though I wouldn't recommend this until you're able to control your powers. Wow, this place is already so massive though. He just chuckled at his childlike wonder. When they had reached the park, Alastor had Izuku sit down. "So, let's see what you can do." After it was all said and done, he had been genuinely surprised to see that he was capable of everything he was, of course leaving out testing the voodoo magic, as that's something that needs to be taught. He'd been able to replicate his abilities, showing he could control his shadow in the same manner, and use them to move around or to interact with the environment. Control fire in the same way as they threw a ball back and forth as if it was a baseball. He'd also been able to conjure up something simple like an All Might figurine out of thin air, although it tired him out a bit doing so. Even the simplest of things like changing his appearance, he'd been able to accomplish. He was ecstatic though when he saw he was strong enough to use demonic magic, though he had a thought on why he was capable. Now, onto the last of things. I want you to try and go into your demonic form. How do I do that? Well, it kind of feels like you're relaxing your body. Like you're letting go of the restraints on your body. Kinda difficult to explain, to be honest. You just know the feeling when you're used to it. With his boy's brain, he knew he'd be able to figure it out. It was something that came natural to demons, so he knew he wouldn't have to wait long. Okay, here goes nothing. It was a beautiful sight to watch as he watched two large horns protrude from his head that was black at base and faded into what could best be described as a magma coloring as they went from black to orange, then red and yellow with it ending in white at the tip. Then he heard what sounded like a tearing sound as he watched his shirt tear open on the backside and two large wings stretch open. They were black along the top and faded into a deep red color like his hair. Izuku gave his wings a few flaps as he stared at them in amazement. So cool. Can I fly with these? He reached up and touched his horns. Looking like this, I can easily scare any villain. Alastor was clapping after Izuku's demonstration of his powers. Excellent, excellent. Looks like I won't need to be too afraid of someone trying to hurt you. Now, I think that's enough for today. You're looking ragged. But Dad, I want to try to see what am I capable of. He was too excited to sleep right now. It was basically like giving a child a toy they've been wanting, then telling them they have to go to bed first before they can play with it. I appreciate the gusto, but we don't want you falling out of the sky now, so we? He really was too precious for his own good. Alastor swore that he'd inflict an eternity of suffering on anyone who even entertained the idea of taking this joy away from him. Izuku's wings dropped along with him, as he had dejectedly agreed with us, Father. Yeah, I guess so. I just really wanted to play with my new powers. If you want something to practice on, then why don't you try putting your horns away without doing the same with your wings? I can do that. Today just kept getting better and better for Izuku. Not only had he found that he had more powers than he thought, but he got to meet and stay with his dad. He just gave Izuku a big smile and put his hand on his shoulder. Come on, I think it's about time we started getting back. With the shadows coming back and consuming them, teleporting them to the front of hotel. They opened the door to see it mostly vacant, aside from Husk, who looked to be about ready to retire for the night. He looked over to the two of them and just gave them a short wave and went about his night. Izuku had ran up the stairs ahead of his father back to the room he found himself in earlier, and opened up his bag and almost went getting ready for bed. He almost went to change when he remembered that he could basically do that on command. Oh yeah, I nearly forgot I could do that. Good to see you're getting the hang of your new powers. He looked back to his father leaning against the door frame. Yeah. I can't wait to show Ka-chan and Mom and everyone else. He was almost bursting with pure excitement. Now remember that you'll be staying here for a while as you get a leash on things. Now that isn't to say that you can't contact them or visit after a bit. He watched as his excitement died down a bit as he mentioned that. Yeah, I remember. Izuku gave him big yawn. Well, looks like someone tired themselves out. Alastor closed the door behind himself and made his way towards the bed. Yeah, today was so exciting. I finally got to meet you and you've shown me so many cool things that I never knew I was capable of. Izuku ran over and gave him a big hug. Come on now, I believe it's time for you to get some rest. He had changed his clothes to something more suitable to wear in bed. Izuku, who had opted to have his wings and horns away as seeing as they'd be a hassle to try and learn to sleep with, began to cuddle up closer to his father, who had put an arm around him in a bit of a protective manner. I love you, Dad. For some reason Alastor really liked hearing those words. I love you too, Izuku. Vaggie, who had been outside the door listening to all this happen, was feeling very conflicted. She had come by to try and find a good time to confront Alastor about this sudden turn of events. She wanted to hate the boy, she wanted to. But she couldn't bring herself to fully do so. She still felt weary about him, but just listening to him and his interaction with his father just further compounded the fact that he was just an innocent kid. She'd also come to realize that, yes, Alastor still wasn't an angel, but that he also wasn't a pure evil person that had no heart. She looked down and noticed that Alastor's shadow was staring at her with its arms and foot tapping. It gave her a shushing motion and shooed her away. This was definitely going to be on her mind for a while. Things were definitely different around the hotel after Izuku's arrival. They still found it baffling who his father was, but they couldn't deny that the little sprout had grown on them. It honestly made them doubt at times that he was Alastor's kid. But on the topic of that man, they realized that he began to act a bit differently when Izuku showed up. It almost seemed like he genuinely cared about Kid, because they had initially thought that he may have been something he was a part of to try and kill his boredom. Izuku would often try to find ways he could help out around the hotel or its inhabitants whenever he wasn't practicing learning or spending time with his father. Over the next month, with his father's help, Izuku had really started to master the powers that he'd been shown by his father. This time, while he was out walking with his father had decided to just walk around the city with him. "Well, my boy, I think it's about time we test our little theory." He waited for Izuku's excited reaction. "Really? Today? You think I'm finally ready?" He was excited but also incredibly nervous at the same time, cause he knew that he'd be alone while in another ring of hell if was able to cross the border. "Yes, I think you're ready. I think you're able enough to deal with any threat that may come your way. But if for any reason you need to get away, you also can easily teleport back in an instant. So I think it's about time you were able to fully explore all of what hell can offer you. Well, at least maybe the Ring of Greed for now. But hopefully the rest of the rings over time." "Why only the Ring of Greed for right now? I want to rest our little theory, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little impatient to learn whether or not you'd be able to traverse all of hell. And I know the Ring of Greed is one you won't have to worry too much about getting into danger. Well, at least any more so than what you can run into here." He gave himself a little chuckle at that. They reached the separation between the Ring of Pride and Greed and just stood there for a moment. Alastor put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and gave him a comforting nod. "Okay, I can do this, I can do this." He took a step forward to put his hand out. Much to his delight, it went right through. He took a deep breath and the rest of his body followed without any difficulty. A giant smile grew on his face as he turned around to his father and ran back through. It worked, it worked. I saw, my boy, I saw." Alastor was laughing with delight. He could only imagine how much Izuku could shake hell to its core. "And since it did work, I've got a little surprise for you." He pulled out a large bundle of cash and handed it to Izuku, who could only stare at it wide-eyed. "What's this for?" He gave the bundle of cash a once-over and was amused by how even though he was in hell, they still had a working currency system. "That there is for you to enjoy your day outside of this boring old city. I've heard word that there's this wonderfully built theme park called Lululand, and I figured it would be a wonderful time for you to go stretch your wings and enjoy a day out." Truth be told, he did have a few doubts about this, but he was confident in his son's abilities and his cunning. "Really? I can go spend the whole day at the amusement park?" He was just itching to go see everything he could. He's been just wanting to see all he could of Hill after learning there was still so much more to see. "Yes, now get going, you little rascal. And remember what I told you about Scam Artist." He ruffled Izuku's hair one last time. Izuku gave him a quick last-minute hug. "Love you, Dad, thank you so much." With that, he ran right back through the barrier and just marveled at the new sights. Something he hadn't noticed until now was that the sky here was a green compared to the usual red he had grown used to. "Man, hell is so weird and cool." He continued onward until he could hear the classic carnival music coming from the park. Turns out that his father had done his best to find a spot in the barrier closed to Lululand. He smiled thinking about how much his father cared for him and what he was willing to do for him. As he ran toward the entrance to the park, he was getting some strange looks as he looked a bit out of place. No one could tell what kind of demon he was supposed to be. Seeing as human-looking demons were exceedingly rare, Izuku didn't notice the strange looks as he was too excited. He got to the entrance of the park and was just buzzing with excitement. "One entrance ticket, please." The man behind the ticket booth counter just lazily stared down at him with indifference. He just wanted the day to be over. $50, please. Man, that was steep. But this was the Ring of Greed after all. That explains why Dad gave me so much money. He had handed his money over and got his ticket. He got the ticket exchanged for the wristband passed his at the entrance to the actual park, and just looked around wondering what he would do first. He saw a tent that had a sign out front that said, "Showing the Great Fizzaroli and Friends Live." Guess that's a good start as any. He paid to get in and took his seat near the front, and found himself sitting next to someone that looked like an owl. He figured he'd try to talk to her, seeing as they'd have to wait a minute for the show to start. "Ooh, I'm so excited." The owl girl to his left looked over at him. "Me too. This is my first time here." My dad's been saying he'd take me here forever now. She turned to look at him, and wasn't really put off by his strange appearance. She stuck her hand out. My name's Octavia, what's yours? Izuku, nice to meet you. It's my first time here too, can't wait to see what an actual amusement park is like. Look! The show's starting. They slowly got quiet as they had seen the curtains slowly start to raise. The sight that greeted them definitely wasn't a comforting one. There was a two-headed badger thing in overalls with a banjo in its hands, and the faces it was posed in were very uncomfortable to look at. What looked like was a small T-Rex with an electric guitar, but its head was turned upside down as if someone had snapped its neck. A rat? That was on the triangle. A frog on the drums in the back, but it looked like its lips were missing, so you could see what looked like a giant pair of dentures the whole time. But the worst one of all was the clown robot thing at the front that had a dangerous toothy smile on it. Hey kids. Are you all ready to have some fun? All around them the two heard cheers for the evil-looking robot, while they on the other hand shrunk back into their seats. But it only kept getting worse. The show was only getting started. It began its unsettling performance, and it began to get close and closer to them as it looked almost like it had locked its sights on them. Izuku looked over at Octavia, who he saw was shaking like a leaf at this point, and had tears forming in her eyes. He himself had seen quite enough of this show and had decided to use his power to use the shadows to consume both him and Octavia. The shadows had then deposited them outside the tent near the entrance to it. Octavia's head snapped around at the sudden change in scenery, and then settled her gaze on Izuku. Did you do that? Oh boy, he had just seen she was in distress and had acted. Why yeah, I just saw that you weren't very comfortable in there, and I had frankly seen enough myself. He spat out quickly, trying to justify his actions, only to be surprised by a hug from her. Thank you. He just stood there stiffly as he slowly patted her on the back. He was a little surprised by this action, as seeing the only people to actually hug him were his own parents. There. It's alright. She gave him a few sniffles and looked back up at him. I'd been looking forward to coming here, but I wasn't expecting that monster to come out on stage. Izuku shuddered at the thought of Fitzgerald. Yeah, that merry band was certainly unsettling, that's for sure. He had nodded his head in agreement. What do you say we go find something more fun to do? I saw a bunch of carnival games we could play. That piqued his interest. Seeing he was making a new friend, he gave her a big smile. Sure! That sounds like loads more fun. She gave him one big smile in return and pulled him off towards where she had seen the games. They began walking towards the games, and almost immediately Octavia had seen a plushie she really wanted. Ooh! Izuku! That one! She began pointing at a game called Just Shoot Apple right next to one that was Happy Duckling. She was pointing at a plushie of a crow with its wings beginning to unfurl from its body. Let's win that! She started pulling him toward the game. Step right up, and win a prize. Izuku and Octavia stepped up to the man. I'd like to play, Octavia excitedly told him. $10, young miss. She then looked like she just remembered something. Oh no, Daddy has all the money. Tough luck. Come back when you got the money, kid. This guy rubbed Izuku the wrong way. Here you go, my dad gave me the money to come here and I've got plenty. He handed her $20. Thank you so much. Here you go. She handed the man $10 for one go. Here you go, missy, one shot all yours. She took the little gun and pointed it, and missed just by an inch. Oh, you nearly had it. Izuku had cheered her on. Ooh, so close. $10 more for one more shot. She quickly slapped the money into his waiting hand. I definitely got it this time. She took aim and pulled the trigger, and watched it hit the apple only for it to not go down. Ooh, better luck next time, missy. Step up, come and win a prize. He began calling out, just blatantly ignoring the fact he cheated. Izuku had quickly guessed what this was and became very upset. Hey! She hit that apple. He looked back at with a smug look. You see that apple, kid? See how it isn't down? Oh, that means you didn't win, and oh no, that means your girl doesn't get the toy. Too bad, so sad now, scram if you ain't going to keep playing. To say Izuku was furious would be understating things. But he kept his cool and did the one heroic thing he could think of other than punching the man's face. I'll play. He handed the man who was just grinning at him. Izuku took the gun and pointed it at the apple. As he pointed it in his anger, shadows began to coil around the gun and made it look much nastier than it originally looks as it turned black with red highlights, and the barrel formed what could be described as a dragon's mouth as it shot out, and practically destroyed the back wall of the attraction with just a little cork. The man just stared in disbelief. Kid, you cheated somehow, you can't. He stopped as he stared at the kid who was just staring at him, and he could just swear he was starting to see and hear static as he spoke. I win now. Where's my prize? He stumbled backwards from the boy, sensing pure death off the boy, and fumbled behind himself to grab the crow plushie and handed it to him. The static slowly died down. Now, was that so hard? Izuku turned around and handed it to Octavia, who just took it and hugged it for all it was worth. Thank you, Izuku, I love it. Izuku just kicked the ground and blushed at the praise. It was nothing really. He smiled, seeing how much joy it had brought her. Come on, Izuku, let's go destroy some other scammers' games. They both began laughing as they went from attraction to attraction, practically destroying all the ones they went to that were rigged. They didn't even take any more prizes. They just had fun destroying the corrupt attractions. Looks like they finally caught on. Izuku had motioned towards what looked like security, supposedly looking for them after their little ruckus. He grabbed her hand, planning on doing what he did earlier. Hang on. With that, they were inside the Hall of Mirrors. They shouldn't find us in here for now. Good thinking, Izuku. Octavia was having the time of her life with her new best friend. After seeing where they were, she quickly thought of a little prank for her friend. She quickly pointed in the other direction. What's that? His head snapped that direction. I don't see Octavia, where'd you go? He began walking the direction he last saw her, and thought he saw her. There you are, why did you? A pair of hands grabbed his sides from behind. Boo! AGH. He nearly jumped out of his skin as his wings practically unfurled on instinct as Octavia managed to scare him good. She was laughing good, rolling on the ground till she could breathe again. When she opened her eyes, they went wide as she now saw that Izuku had a large pair of beautiful wings. Gasp. Since when did you have those? She tentatively touched one and proceeded to run her hands down his wings. Well, I've always had them, I just chose not to have them out right now. Thought it'd be a hassle to move around the amusement park, and seeing as I'm not 100% used to them yet. He was stuttering, seeing how she had practically been enthralled by his wings. Why would you ever hide these? They're so pretty. Thank you. I like them too. I guess I was maybe a bit embarrassed to show them off yet. This was a situation that Izuku was not prepared to find himself in. Well, don't be, these are amazing. Eventually she'd let up on him. Well, come on, we don't have all day to hang out. And please keep your wings out. I guess it can't hurt anything. They proceeded to have fun all around the circus. At some point ran into another clown who had gone by the name Blitzo, but this one was much less scary when compared to Fitzgerald. Hello? Izuku had walked up to him and gave him a big smile. Blitzo just looked down at him confused. What? You draw the short end of the stick and have to come talk to me? Izuku just tilted his head in confusion. What do you mean? You came up to me? Willingly? You got a screw loose or something? Why aren't you in there with all those other snot-nosed brats drooling all over watching that run piece of junk? Izuku and Octavia shuddered. We'd rather not ever interact with him again. A pair of kids with an actual brain on their shoulders. So what do you kids want with me? He started to like these too. We were just curious, wanted to know what you were about, that, and you don't seem too happy here. He said with complete honesty. Because I'm stuck in this shithole, why else? He said while sounding purely frustrated. Then why don't you go do something else than work for here? Anything else, you can even start a company if nothing else, doing something you enjoy. Trust me kid, I'd love to do that. Problem is, to do something like that you need money. Ever heard of it? He liked the idea, but kids and their fantasies. Oh? Is that all? Is that all? You make it seem like it's the simplest thing in the world. Kid, money isn't. He was shocked when he pulled out a giant wad of cash and handed it towards him. Here you go. He handed it to him like it was just the most normal thing in the world. What the hell? Kid, what's with the massive load of money? Do you even know how much this is? He was flabbergasted by this kid. To help you get started. Besides, we were getting ready to leave anyways. This kid was something else. Then what about? I don't need the money if that's what you're worried about. Then at least give me your names if you're basically giving me a free ticket out of this dump. My name's Izuku Midoriya, he said with a proud smile. And my name's Octavia, she said much more timidly than her friend. Well, Izuku, owe you one. Give me a call if you ever need anything. He gave them his personal cell number. Now if you excuse me, I have a life to get started. He went off on his way. He really owed these kids big time. Both of the kids just went about the rest of the day enjoying it to their heart's content. Then the day was slowly coming to an end. Octavia had been the first to notice the sky getting. Ah man, we were having so much fun. I guess we need to go find my dad now. Izuku's shadow began waving its arms and pointed in a direction away from them. Ah, that's so cool, I had no idea your shadow could do that. She watched in fascination at the shadow that seemingly had a life of its own. Yeah, it has a mind of its own, but it listens to me when I want to do something. It looks like it's trying to point our attention over there though. What over AO? Is that your dad? Octavia looked up and noticed her dad off in the distance. Yeah, how'd you know? Well, I can definitely see the resemblance, and I think my shadow overheard you and was trying to tell us he was over there. His shadow nodded at that. Oh, so neat. Thank you, Izuku's shadow. It put its hand on the back of its hand and scratched at the ground with its foot. Her dad had approached them. Well, my little Starfire, it would appear you've had your fun for the day with your little friend. Yeah. Me and Izuku had a blast today. But how do you know where to find us? He chuckled at that. Oh, come now. I couldn't just not know where my daughter was now, could I? I've been watching from a distance to make sure you didn't get into too much trouble, but looks like I never really needed to step in. I didn't want to interrupt you playtime with your new friend here. Oh, thanks, Dad. But Izuku, was it? We have to chat sometime. Seeing as you've become a fast friend of my daughter's, it'd be a shame for you two to not continue fostering that friendship. I'd hate to see my little Starfire sad. Dad, don't embarrass me. She began pushing on his leg to try not to say too much. He just chuckled at her. But we'll catch up another time. It has gotten quite late, and we must be getting back. He handed a business-looking card with a number on it. What this? The number for our household, of course. How else could you talk to each other? They each brightened up at hearing this. But I am most curious, where is your guardian? Oh, he's back at home. He couldn't come with me but said he trusted enough to be by myself. Oh, well, he certainly must have a lot of faith in you. But where are you staying? That was a bit of a curious answer. Oh, the Happy Hotel. Back the Ring of Pride. Here's the number you can reach us at. He handed them a piece of paper that materialized in his hand with the name and number on it. Oh, this was very interesting indeed. Well, thank you, Izuku, and have a good night. We must be off. Say your goodbyes, Octavia. Bye, Izuku. I'll call you tomorrow, alright? She gave him one last big hug and enjoyed the feeling when he returned the hug and his wings wrapped around her in response. Okay, talk to you tomorrow. He waved them goodbye, and when they could see each other, Izuku had the shadows take him back home. He was so excited for tomorrow and everything he would share with everyone. Izuku had come out of the shadows to the door of the hotel. He proceeded inside to find Husk at the reception desk sipping on his cheap liquor that his dad always gave him. Sup, kid? He gave him a big smile that Husk had to avert his eyes from how bright it was. I made new friends today. Did you now? He raised his eyebrow at that. And where'd you meet someone that didn't run away from you at first sight? Izuku had gone to answer but felt a hand on his shoulder from behind. He was bound to find someone to play with eventually. He turned to see the smile of his dad. Oh, Dad. Where have you been? Oh, out and about. Talking to an old acquaintance. He gave him a sly grin. Ooh, Dad. I made new friends today. I met a girl my age who looked like an owl and her name was Octavia. Then there was this imp called Blitzo. He looked a little funny in the clown costume. He looked a little down, so we went and talked to him, but we had so much fun. He was absolutely buzzing with excitement, just wanting to share everything that happened. Sounds like you had a busy day today. But isn't it time for bed? Izuku shook his head as he rubbed his eyes. He was exhausted from running around the whole day with Octavia. Go on and get ready for bed. I'll be up in just a moment. Izuku ran up the stairs to get ready for the night. After he was out of eyesight, Alastor turned around back towards Husk. Now, where might be Charlie at? I've got something I'm trying to put together for my boy. Don't want to even know, she's in the back. Doing who knows what to try and keep this place running. He pointed over his shoulder. He just grinned at Husk. Oh, don't give me that face, it's nothing too bad. He walked past him to find Charlie going through some documents. She looked up to see him approaching with his wide, toothy smile on display. What is it, Alastor? She was still a bit overwhelmed at current circumstances. She still couldn't comprehend that Alastor had somehow figured out to do the impossible and actually have a child. But she was grateful that Izuku hadn't come out a carbon copy of Alastor. Oh, the cold shoulder. Now, I am planning to do something special for Izuku. She rolled her eyes at him. And what would that be? I'm planning for his birthday. She was honestly not suspecting such an innocent answer. She narrowed her eyes at him. And that's it? No crazy idea or plan to kill your boredom? He feigned being emotionally hurt. You strike me deep. But there is one crazy idea that I have in mind for this occasion. He slowly grinned at her, which caused her to shift uncomfortably. And what would that be? She was dreading the answer to that question. Nothing was ever simple with Alastor. Oh, nothing. Just to have everyone here show and for it to be with his mother. Oh, that's nothing. Wait. With his mother, as in she comes down here to hell? Oh, heavens no, of course not. Thank goodness, because she wouldn't have been able to survive down. But for us to go up there. He waited for her reaction, and oh boy did her enjoy it. What? Us? Up there? Alastor, what in Satan's name are you thinking? For us to go up there would be absolutely insane. Alastor never ceased to surprise her. Funny thing about that, people could see us and wouldn't even bat an eye at us. What with their quirks and everything, they'd think nothing of us. He seemed dead set on this idea. Alastor, we can't just go waltzing around in the living world all carefree. Not just because you thought it'd be fun. It's truly all for the boy. This'll be the last birthday he sees his mother alive before she ends up down here. He had much more of a serious tone when he said this. How would you know that? Is she sick or something? Well, it's to do with Izuku's conception. As you know, sinners can't normally procreate, but due to some interesting information I had received, I had managed to do what many thought impossible. But due to the combination of having my child in conjunction to her body not being able to have children, it took a toll on her health. He sounded much more grim as he was telling her this, with no hint of his usual playful tone. How could you do that to that woman? She was appalled with what she was hearing. He looked at her and chuckled a bit. Believe it or not, it was all her choice, knowing the consequences and all. She wanted the family that she had been denied so badly for so long. She was willing to suffer to get what she wanted. Sigh. She's one hell of a woman, reminds me a lot of my own. He looked up as if reminiscing. Alastor, it almost sounds like you. He looked towards her, interrupting her before she could finish her sentence. Now, can you please help me do this for the boy? He ought to have the chance to see his mom alive and enjoy what time she has up there before she's dragged down here. She just looked at him and didn't feel any ill will whatsoever. This was the most honest and sincere she's seen Alastor. Fine, I'll help you. Now how in the world do we even go about transporting everyone there? Alastor chuckled at her. That, my dear, is something that I believe the answer will come to us. What do you mean by that? That is a surprise. Now, just worry about everything else. She didn't like how he always knew something she didn't. But he is known as one of the most dangerous overlords for a reason. Now have a good night, my dear. He walked back towards whence he came, leaving Charlie in her thoughts about what had just transpired and everything she'll have to prepare for Izuku's birthday. As Izuku had started to fall into the clutches of sleep, his mind kept racing about how he wanted to keep talking and playing with his new friend. Meanwhile, all the way over in a certain mansion, a certain little owl was thinking the same thing about the first proper friend she's been able to make, all while clutching the crow plushie close to her as she fell asleep. The next morning, after rambling on to his father about everything that had transpired the night before, Izuku raced to the hotel phone after remembering the number he had been given to be able to talk to Octavia. He punched the numbers into the old-looking phone and held the receiver up to his ear, listening to it ring until he heard someone pick up on the other end. It took a moment, but Izuku realized that it was Stola's on the other end. Hello? Hello? It's me, Izuku. We met yesterday. I was hoping to reach Octavia. Oh yes, the little friend my daughter made. Oh, here she is. He heard him telling her who was on the other end till what sounded like her scrambling for the receiver, and heard her excited voice on the other end. Hey Izuku. How are you? Great, how are you? Alastor was around the corner as he listened to his son talk on and on to the new little friend he had made the night prior. He's yet to meet her, but that's something that he'll have to correct. He kept listening and chuckled at what was being said. I'd love to meet up again at Lululand, but they may be on the lookout for us, seeing as we destroyed half the stalls. That's my boy. Alastor had thought with a big grin. Octavia sounded a bit upset by this. Then where are we supposed to meet each other at? On the other end, Izuku could hear Stola's pipe up. Now I couldn't help but overhear your little problem, and I have an excellent solution to this. Why don't we just go visit him at where he's staying? Octavia seemed enthused by the idea. Ooh, yeah. We can come visit you, Izuku. That's okay, right? Let me ask Mai. Why, yes, that's okay. Izuku slightly jumped when his dad had just appeared beside him. When did you? Oh, I've been listening, but I figured something like this would come up. So yes, we're free anytime today. Izuku gave him a big hug in response. Thank you so much, Dad. He picked the receiver back up. We're free anytime today. Great. We'll see you in an hour. Izuku was over the moon that she was able to come here to play and not have to go to some overpriced park to hang out every time. Izuku then rushed off to make sure he was properly dressed and looked his best. Meanwhile, Alastor had gone to find Charlie, who happened to have Vaggie with her at the time. He found them bickering about what he and Charlie talked about last night. How many times do I have to tell you to talk with me first before making big decisions like this? Especially when it's the request of him. Vaggie didn't look furious at this, just deeply upset she made yet another questionable decision. I know, Vaggie, but listen. He seems genuinely invested in his son and wanted to do something nice for him. She was pretty adamant about her decision. Well, looks can be deceiving, especially when it comes to. It's not healthy for a relationship to fight like this, you know. Alastor had leaned in mid-conversation with a smug smile on his face. Holy shit, Alastor, what the hell? Vaggie had jumped backwards, spear in hand, at the sudden appearance of the radio demon. What do you want? Alastor, looking unfazed by this, just pushed the tip of the spear out of that way. I thought it polite to inform you that we'll be having company soon. Charlie looked up from where she was sitting. What kind of company? Seeing as her last company had tried basically blowing up the hotel with a freaking blimp of all things. Oh, just some nice friends Izuku made the other day. Vaggie looked irritated. What kind of friends? Alastor glanced over at her, still keeping his wide smile. No one bad, I assure you. But if I were you, I'd want to look presentable. With that, Alastor was gone within his shadow. Vaggie put away her spear and just face-bombed. What's he gone and done now? For the next hour they waited for the mystery guest to arrive. Husk sat behind the counter like usual, sipping his cheap booze. Nifty was off and about, making sure the hotel was spick and span like usual. Charlie had waiting around the lobby with Vaggie near her. She was nervous considering this was company that Alastor had invited over. Izuku was off in the corner trying to distract himself until Octavia got there with an interesting book he found about hell and its many species. Then they heard a car pull up to the front and the doorbell shortly follow. Charlie got up to let them in while Vaggie followed close behind her, unsure of who may be on the other side of the door. Saint Stolas. What are you doing here? He looked down at her and smiled. Is Izuku here? I have someone who would just love to see him. She looked down, and hiding behind her father's legs she saw a small little owl face poking out. Izuku came running to the door. Octavia! Izuku! She watched as the little owl shot out from behind Stolas like a bullet to greet Izuku. Hey, where's your wings? Oh, right, sorry. She looked unsurprised when two large wings came out of Izuku's back, since he'd yet to show everyone there. Husk looked up interested when he saw the wings pop out, seeing as now he wasn't the only one in the hotel with wings. Izuku, since when could you do that? Oh, did I never show you? It must have slipped my mind while Dad was busy showing me how to control my powers. He looked back toward Octavia and grabbed her hand. Come on, let's go play. I got some cool books about heroes I brought from home. Stolas smiled seeing his little girl so happy. Now, since they're off playing, I am most curious about that boy. Alastor had seemingly popped back in from nowhere again, as if on K. I see you've taken a liking to my son, he said while looking all too happy. Your son? My, this is interesting. Do tell me more. Stolas at this point was totally invested in hearing about this boy, seeing as this sinner demon was the supposed father. He couldn't deny it either, seeing as the boy had an uncanny resemblance to him. If you're so interested, then do follow me. I've prepared a nice little spot for us to discuss things. Everyone just watched dumbfounded yet again as they saw the two walk out the door to wherever it was that Alastor was taking them. That was when Angel Dust walked to the door frame shortly after they left. Was I seeing things, or did I just see a Prince of Hell just leave the hotel? They all just looked at him and shook their heads. It was always one thing or another at this hotel. Hours later, Charlie saw Alastor and Stolas had started to return. They also seemed to be chatting about something. I still can't believe he was the one to give you the information. Alastor chuckled, looking back towards Stolas. Me either, but am I glad he did. There's nothing quite like being a parent. Oh, do I know what you mean? My life changed after Octavia was born, he said while reminiscing about the past. When they reached the inside of the hotel, and to where Charlie was waiting at, Stolas approached her. I'd love to help you with your little transportation issue, assuming you'll have us there, of course. Why, yes, of course, I couldn't say no to that. I'm just surprised is all. But I have to know. Where did you meet Izuku? Stolas looked at her and chuckled. Why, at Lululand, of course. I was taking my daughter there, and that's where the two ran into each other, and the next thing I knew they were fast friends. Lululand? But that's in the Ring of Greed. How does Izuku get there? She was puzzled, seeing as sinners weren't able to get past the barriers to other rings. Alastor piped up at this point. Why, I took him to the closest spot in the barrier, and he walked through. He said it as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. She looked at him confused. But sinners shouldn't be able to leave the Ring of Pride. Now that's best part. I may be a sinner, and he may be my son. But he isn't by definition a sinner. He's a natural-born being of demonic descent, making him a natural-born demon, thus being able to traverse the barriers. Charlie couldn't take much more surprises. I need to sit down. Stolas and Alastor just laughed at her reaction. As much as I would love to stay and chat, we must be going. This was an enjoyable evening out. Octavia. He went towards the stair and called up to his daughter. Coming. She came racing down the stairs with Izuku in tow. Yes, Daddy? We've got to be heading home now. He watched her expression drop as she was having fun with Izuku. Already? He chuckled at her response. Yes, already. Come, we must get back in time for dinner. You can come and visit again another day. That's when she thought of something. Ooh, when can he come visit our house? Stola's face had visibly dropped a little bit at that thought. I would love to have him visit, but that'd be kind of difficult, dear. It's nothing against Izuku, it might just be a bit before we can make that happen. With Stella there, I don't like to think how'd she react to Izuku. She was upset that her idea was shot down pretty quickly. Now none of that, I didn't say he was never welcome, now tell everyone goodbye. She perked up and turned to Izuku and gave him a hug and had herself get wrapped up in his wings, which Stolas thought was adorable. Bye everyone. I'll talk to you on the phone later, Izuku. With that, they got back into the vehicle they arrived in and left. Charlie looked over in Alastor's direction. You just love being unpredictable, don't you? That caused Alastor to laugh. Later, as she said she would, Octavia called Izuku and they talked late into the night about whatever they could think of. Izuku would take notes about some of the things she liked from books, occult things, and for some odd reason taxidermy. Probably why she liked the crow he managed to get her so much. Over the next week things stayed relatively normal. Izuku had talked to Octavia over the phone almost whenever they had free time. She also would visit whenever she could. He would spend time with his father too, until one day Alastor had wanted to go on a walk with him early in the morning and didn't have them come back to the hotel until a good solid hour later. When they got back and walked inside, Izuku quickly noticed that everyone at the hotel was currently in the lounge along with Octavia and Stolas, and even Blitzo? What's everyone doing here? He had no idea why everyone he knew had gathered together. Alastor put his hand on his son's shoulder. I wouldn't be much of a father if I forgot my own son's birthday now, would I? Izuku's eyes widened at the mention of his birthday, having totally forgotten about it given the string of events leading him here now. I don't know what to say. Izuku's eyes were starting to tear up at the kind gesture that everyone had given him to celebrate his birthday. Even Blitzo is here? Stolas chuckled. Yes, Octavia just wouldn't let me help plan this without inviting the imp. You two helped, giving me the excuse, he can act as your own bodyguards. He chuckled at his daughter's antics, knowing she had wanted to help him, remembering he was trying to get a business started. But truth be told, she followed along with her little antics because he did catch his attention. Yeah? I still owe you 2-1 anyways. And it's Blitz now, the O is silent. So, we going or what? Izuku was curious by what he had said. Where are we going? Alastor's smile couldn't get any bigger. Why, to your mother, of course. We couldn't plan your party without including her and you other friend, now could we? Izuku couldn't help but cry at this point. Thank you so much, Dad. Alastor patted his back as he let all his emotions out. They're my boy. But you should know it wasn't just me who planned all this, Charlie and Stolas helped too. Izuku turned around and gave them a deep bow. Thank you all so much for doing all this for me. They all just smiled or chuckled at the boy's antics. Stolas was the next to speak up. We can all wish him a happy birthday in a bit, But I don't think we should keep everyone waiting now, should we? With that he caused a red-drawn hexagram to appear on the wall, like the one Izuku found himself stepping into just about 2 months ago. As it grew in size, the hexagram drawing faded away into what looked like a doorway into a decent-sized apartment. Then everyone started filing through it into the living world. When they had all made it through the portal, they followed Izuku further into the house until they came across the kitchen, which had birthday essentials all prepared for a party. They also saw a beautiful younger woman sitting there look their way when they came around the corner. Izuku just stood there a moment, and the woman just stared at the boy. "Mom! Izuku!" He ran up to her, who then picked her son and stood there for a moment with him in her arms, crying that she was able to see her boy again. She did notice the new addition of the wings furled on his back, but she slowly let him back down to look up after noticing everyone else. "And who are these fine individuals?" Izuku went around introducing everyone. Izuku slowly got around to introducing everyone, saving his other best friend and father for last. "This is a new friend I made. Her name is Octavia." She poked around Izuku and gave Inko a quick wave. "And this is Dad." "Hello, Alastor, looking sharp as ever I see. It's good to see you so soon again." "Still stunning as ever I see, but it's only been a week since we last talked. You make it sound like forever ago." Angel Dust leaned over and whispered to Husk. "I thought he was asexual or something. With him, you never know what to trust." Alastor looked back at them with a grin, causing them to quickly shut up. Alastor clapped his hands together. "What do you guys say we finally get this party started?" At this everyone started cheering. Husk was shocked, knowing his alcohol well knew that this wasn't something too easy to come by. "You sure you just want to give this away? This is some top shelf stuff." She gave them a sweet smile and looked like she wouldn't take no for an answer. He turned back towards Angel Dust. He looked pretty happy about the situation. "Well, Husky, bottoms up." After people started enjoying themselves for about half an hour, they heard the doorbell ring. Inko was in the middle of making sure the food was finished, along with Charlie and Vaggie helping her. "Can you get that, please?" Since Angel Dust was closest to it, he opened the door and looked down to see a blonde model and her son in tow behind her, with the father standing on his other side sighing at his son's attitude. "I told you we'd be late, you old hag." "Oh, shut up you, oh hello?" She punched her son in the head and looked up to see a tall spider person with 4 arms looking down at her. Angel Dust looked back into the apartment. "Who ordered an angry chihuahua? What did you call me?" Izuku came running through the apartment with Octavia not far behind him. "Ka-chan." "Deka." Everyone was a bit confused by the name, but seeing that the two boys seemed pretty close, they chalked it up to just a fun nickname they had made for each other. Mitsuki went over to Inko to help her finish everything up. "This is definitely a interesting group of individuals you've got here," she said while taking everyone in. "They're quirky, that's for sure, but they're not so bad," she said contently. Sigh. If only this could last forever. Mitsuki gave her a sad look, full well knowing what this meant. Izuku had introduced Bakugo to Octavia, who was a bit timid of the loud boy at first but got used to his abrasiveness after a bit, realizing that yes, he's loud and rough around the edges but not a horrible person underneath. Katsuki quickly took to just calling her owl face, which took a minute for Izuku to try and explain that she's already better off than other people in Katsuki's eyes, as he'll usually call people whom he doesn't care for extras. The party had gone underway with fun being had, after everyone had sung happy birthday to Izuku and stuffed themselves silly with food and dessert. After everyone had finished eating, Inko had brought out Izuku's main present after she gave him a limited edition All Might figurine. "Now since you're old enough, I think it's about a good enough time that I gave you this present." She pulled out a small rectangular present. He stared at it curiously and tore it open. He stared and what seemed to be his mother a few years ago in it with him as a baby. What made this special though was the fact his father was also in the picture, being the one to hold Izuku in the photo, genuinely smiling, looking down at Izuku. Everyone that knew Alastor did a double take of the photo and the man in question, who merely gave them a smug smirk. "This was the first photo of you when we got back home with all 3 of us in the same photo. I couldn't show or give this to you until you got old enough to actually meet your dad. Happy birthday, Izuku." "Happy birthday, my boy." He got up and gave them both a big hug. Alastor smiled down at his son, enjoying the act of being a father. After that, everyone just started going about the party. Izuku, Octavia, and Katsuki were all playing in the living room, having fun. Nifty was always trying to keep things as clean as possible as usual. Charlie and Vaggie sat with Mitsuki and Inko, curious of the one who mothered Izuku and somehow managed to slightly humanize Alastor. Angel Dust, Husk, and Masaru were all drinking the Mars Maltage Cosmo that Inko gifted them. Though Masaru was a bit of a lightweight and tapped out early on. Blitz would take some shots here and there but was mostly talking business with Stolas. Alastor was simply enjoying the change of pace and environment for once. It was all so peaceful and enjoyable until they heard the doorbell once again, which confused Inko as everyone was present already. "I got it, guys." She went to open the door. "Hello?" The first thing she noticed was the smell of alcohol. He was wearing ratty clothing and looked like he hadn't slept somewhere decent in months. He had a bottle in hand and he hadn't shaved in who knows how long. But she would never forget that hated face. Hisashi had shown up on her son's birthday of all days. She went to slam the door on his face but he stuck his foot in the frame. "Where's my son?" "Go away, Hisashi. I want you out of here. Now." She spoke with an even tone, barely controlling her temper. If it wasn't for Izuku in the house she'd skewer Hisashi. "I want to see my son." Izuku and Octavia got up at this point as they were looking for his mom to find new batteries for the remote to the TV. Octavia saw her at the door and pointed her out to him, and they went to ask her where she kept them at. "He's not your son." "The hell he is." At this point he had seen Izuku walking up behind her and tried shoving her out of the way. Inko was suddenly a couple feet back from where the door had swung open, missing her due to her being moved, and the hand that was outstretched to reach Izuku had been grabbed by the wrist by one unhappy demon. "Ani DIY hi, IDIEUIIT hi INIKI IUII REIIT IT UICI hi IMEICNE I." The manner in which it was said sent chills down everyone's spines. But it would appear the man had a death wish. "The hell do you mean your son? You were cheating on me." He went to throw the bottle from his other head, but due to him being drunk his aim was awful as it found itself on a collision course with a small little outlet. The bottle just vanished from sight, and in front of his daughter Stolas had appeared in a moment's notice. "You stupid warehouse." At this point Angel Dust and Husk got up from their drinking game and Angel Dust clocked him in the face. Husk looked at Alastor as he walked by. "We'll get him out of here. You take care of things right here for now." "Daddy? Who was that man and why was he calling me his son? Aren't you my daddy?" Izuku was shaking a little bit from the experience and was starting to tear up a bit. Alastor knelt down and pulled him into a hug. "Yes, I am your dad. That was just a delusional man. One who doesn't seem to know when things are over. But don't doubt that you are my son, and I won't ever let that man try to take you." He hugged his father tightly before he let him go. His mother went to console him along with his best friends trying to cheer him up. Alastor got up and walked out the door. Stolas quickly followed, as did Blitz a few moments later after taking a quick shot of the good stuff. Angel Dust and Husk were at the bottom of the stairs and pointed in the direction he had stumbled before heading back on inside. A bit into the city, in a random alleyway, Hisashi was stumbling around drunk and grumbling about Inko being an unfaithful whore the whole time, and just having a hard time staying upright. "I'll show that bitch, Hick, and that bastard son of hers too. All of them." "Are you now?" The tone of voice made his skin crawl as he turned around and saw the man she cheated on him with. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face to me, freak. Not only did you dare show your face back up at her own home, you dared threaten her and my son." The way he was talking was really starting to unsettle him. He could swear he was starting to see static. That was when he started walking closer. Hisashi was about to try and run at him to throw a wild punch. But he noticed something. Not only did the static keep getting worse, but the man was slowly changing. He watched his body contort, horns slowly grow from his head, his hands slowly stretch into something more akin to claws than hands, and his eyes, dear God, his eyes, it was like staring into the deep abyss. "Not even your bones will be left to identify you. Monster. Monster. Somebody. Help me." He turned around to run away in the other direction, but to only see another one of the people that was at the party. This man looked like a giant owl. "You dare try to hurt my little Starfire?" He fell on his ass and began to crawl backwards from the owl thing as it grew larger and looked like something straight out of a nightmare. It grew larger and larger as the owl beast, as it was covered in red and black feathers in a way that made it look like it was covered in blood or veins or something, he couldn't tell what. He looked both ways and neither way was an option as he curled up and just started bawling as they drew nearer and nearer. His loud screams would go unheard that night. Blitz just watched the show from the rooftop above it while eating some popcorn. "This is gonna be one hell of a mess for me to clean up." That's it, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. With that, take care.